Hey for one, Ekman here with another video, and we have about a month left of the OP09 meta for the English version of the One Piece card game. And to kind of celebrate that, I do want to just kind of make one more kind of meta video for this. I will be continuing to update the power rankings here on my website, Eggman Events, so you will be able to find them here every week. But this will probably just be my last video. We kind of know what things look like. I want to go over a couple deck lists and their stats, but then also my kind of tier list to kind of end out the last month of this format. So if you guys are interested in this content, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. It does help the channel a lot, and we will be making a lot more content of OP09 meta as we end it, but also we're already shifting into the OP010 stuff as well. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and let's just jump on into it. So power rankings for this week, we do have Doflamingo pretty much first place every week that we've had this. Like, you could go down the line, it has been in that number one spot every week since we've had this meta. It has been a force to be reckoned with. I don't think that surprised anyone in this meta right now. But we have Purple Luffy second place, Marshall D. Teach in third, we have the Stardeck 13 Luffy in fourth, Shanks in fifth, Rob Lucci in sixth, the red and purple Luffy in seventh, dropping a couple spots, Bonnie with an eighth place finish, a Smoker ninth place finish, and a Betty in 10th. So generally speaking, I think these top five have been generally here for the majority of this meta. They've been very strong and very present in their own way. Even top six, I think all of these six leaders have generally been on this power rankings for the entirety of this meta. Only exception is Luffy, since it did have an issue with the ranks system for a little bit, but it got fixed and we're all good on that one. And then the kind of like the bottom 4 or 5 spots have been rotating around quite a bit. I think Stardeck 10 Luffy has been present, but he's never been like super high on it. Bonnie kind of comes and goes between the weeks, and then Smoker, which we haven't seen as much on the ladder, but we have been seeing it a little bit more during some of these competitive events that we've had during our kind of end of OP09 treasure cups that have been happening online as well. So pretty standard, but I do think that the Smoker inclusion is pretty interesting, and we are going to go over a couple deck lists. We aren't going to go through all the deck lists either, but we are going to just kind of go through kind of the bottom 4, which aren't as popular, I think, right now. So going through the matchups, I don't have much to say about these. It's pretty clear that Dofi generally has a pretty solid matchup chart. Only real issue is that, you know, sometimes Rob Lucci has enough removal, sometimes Bonnie is slow enough. Anel is your worst matchup, but it's not as present right now. And we also have the Stardeck 13 Luffy, which is pretty present as well, but is a pretty tough deck to pilot. It does have its own bad matchup in the Teach, but Teach also has a bad matchup into the Dofi. So kind of like a mini triangle, though I will say that the Dofi and the Luffy are the two bigger sides of the triangle, and then we've got the Teach, which Teach has been, I think, on the rise here in the English version and in North America. It did kind of have a bit of a slow start, and I think because I just feel like exponentially more Dofi players than in other regions that have playing this, or, you know, are playing One Piece. That's just made it a little bit trickier for Teach to establish anything in our metas, but I have been seeing it get more and more popular. It's definitely a deck that you have to full commit to in this meta, and you do have to know all of your matches pretty well, so you know when and what their extensions are and how to play it too. So other than that, I don't think there's anything too remarkable to talk about. I think that the matchups are pretty strong and known, but I do appreciate having this chart for what it is, so you guys can find that as well. Jumping to the deck list, we are going to the bottom 4. We're going to start off with the Monkey D. Luffy. If you guys know, this is my favorite leader to play right now, just because the deck building is so open, and I feel like we find different techs and different kind of ways to build it every week, and this week is no exception. The biggest thing that I've noticed was the slow beam sword, which this is a 2 Dawn counter, and then Dawn -1 up to one of your leaders or characters gets plus 2k power during this battle, then rest up to one of your opponent's characters. So this is kind of like a get out of free jail, because it gets rid of 2. Leaving 2 Dawn open is not terribly difficult for us to do, especially if we have 10 Dawn. We can play one of our 9 drops, like our 9 drop Luffy, and then we can instead ramp 1 Dawn afterwards. We have 2 Dawn open, we still have our 6k leader swing, and then we can use this slow beam sword. So I do think that is kind of okay. And the trigger off of life, not that we get a lot of triggers out of life, since we only do have 3 life, to ramp a Dawn can be impactful. But we also do have the It's to Die For, as well as the Lead Performer Disaster. Just a lot of ways for you to be able to get ramp, and you'll see there's no Zoro Juro in this build, which in some matchups I think you could get its effect off pretty easily, but without it, just being able to use Bond Clay or one of your ramp events, I think that's fine. I think Gum Gum Giant is really good at cleaning out your hand for some events that are just kind of nasty. But even like Lead Performer Disaster, if you hit that out of your life, you still get the draw from it, which is really nice. So in general, I think this is an interesting build. I do like the Sanji and the Ben Beckman. I do like the use as Captain Kidd and then Linland be able to again get cards out of our hand to be able to like discard one and heal one based off like one of these events that were kind of stuck in there. I do think that helps out the deck a lot. So I really like this deck. I hope it still does well and looking forward to seeing how it does in the next couple of weeks. Bonnie's been a little bit absent in the last couple of weeks of our own events here for the English version. It's always been a pretty solid deck since release in OP07. Definitely not as strong as Rob Lucci, which is also out in OP07, but it is a deck that does have just some issues with consistency. I do think it's getting a big kind of resurgence in Japan with the release of OP10 with the Smoker and Toshigi super rares. Not only the protection from the Toshigi, but Smoker also being just a really good 5-drop that is just letting you use your leader ability every turn for free, which is great. So with all that in mind, I think Bonnie does have a lot of great abilities for it. It does have some lopsided matchups, but there's not really a lot that I'm seeing from here. The one thing will notice from kind of deck lists I'm looking at, like the beginning of OP10, people generally aren't playing the Don Quixote family stuff anymore. They're just kind of focusing only on the Supernova stuff. They might be playing a couple 10-drop Dofis, but other than that, it's just not really present in these builds. So I think that's interesting that it starts to move away from it, but it makes sense when you kind of have to find the room for Toshigi and Smoker. You can't play both in the same time. So anyways, I think Bonnie's in an okay spot, but definitely it's been getting worse, I feel like, in the last couple weeks, but here it is. Next up, we've got Smoker, which this one I think has been a little bit more popular towards the end of this meta. It is a removal deck, and that does mean you do have a chance to be able to get the removal against Doflamingo players a lot of the time. We do have our Toshigi, which is really good for getting removals, not only at like, you know, regular cost bodies, but the fact that you can also have some really good matchups across the board. So you can see Smoker, the only kind of rough matchup that we have is the BY Luffy, but definitely, you know, we also have like Rob Lucci, right, who also hates that matchup. So it's like it's a little bit more obtainable for us. And then like the purple and black Luffy, which hasn't been more present. But generally speaking, it's been looking like there's a pretty solid matchup chart for the Smoker, especially since we do have the activate main that does get around the activate or the on play restriction from some stuff. So because of that, Smoker is able to get a lot of advantage from it. Like Kaido gets to do the same thing. So Kaido with Ice Age can still get rid of a 10-drop Teach, which is really nice, and make our opponent discard a card. We have the Brook, we have the Kobe, which I've been seeing a lot more of this card. And in general, I think Smoker's in a really good spot. So I think the only other card is like some people play Jack with it still, which I think is fine. Kaido, I think, is more hedging your bets for specifically BY Luffy, as well as the Teach as mentioned, which I think this is a fine tech choice for it there. But this is Smoker. And then last we've got Betty. Betty's been kind of, it started off pretty strong in this meta. It was pretty popular on a lot of these at the beginning, where we saw it pop up here and there, but it's been kind of like losing popularity, I think, since like the Card Fest finals. So it's been, you know, bouncing around like the bottom 3, I think, when it is present with it. There's not much to change with it. I think the one thing that I have been seeing a little bit more is the Revolution Army HQ, which is essentially the same thing that we have stage-wise for the Blackbeard and Teach stuff, but it's for Revolution Army. But again, when our entire deck is Revolution Army cards, we really will never miss it. Like, it's legitimate, we cannot miss. There's 50 cards Revolution Army in the deck. So I think that this is a standard deck for what this aggro build looks like. I don't think aggro is as popular right now in general outside of Doflamingo, which is aggressive, but more kind of like tempo aggression. And the issue with this is that there's just a little bit of RNG, but on the flip side, like sometimes the RNG goes your way and you're in a good spot. But I do like the idea of using this. You do kind of go -1 in a deck that just doesn't really get a lot of card draw, since we do try to just get as many cards out of our hand as possible. But I do think that is helpful too. But this is the Betty, and you could probably get like a top in one of the Treasure Cups or One Piece Day that we have for the last month of it, but it's definitely not a deck that's my own play style, so it's hard for me to be interested in a build like this. But that's kind of all the deck lists I want to talk about today. Again, if you guys want any of them, they're on my website, Eggman Events. We have all of them. I will say, like, the top 6 are generally just standard builds for these decks. We kind of know what they look like, but in case you need a reference, I think that's really good for that. So that's kind of it for this, and let's go to our conclusion and the kind of tier list I have for the end of this format. All right, to wrap up this video, we've got my final tier list for the OP09 meta of the One Piece card game. In the best deck and format, we do have the Doflamingo, we have the Black Yellow Luffy, and Rob Lucci. I think most people kind of agree with this. Definitely think that Dofi, if not like best deck and format, is like one tier above this, but it is very strong in its own way. Black Yellow Luffy, I think, is almost as strong, and the only issue is that it is a little bit trickier to pilot. I think Dofi, when it comes down to it, there's kind of like a plateau, and then there's like this 5% when someone's like really, really good with the deck, but it also has the factor that if it wants to win, it just will, which is really strong. And we got Rob Lucci. This deck is, I think, pretty strong. Its removal is unparalleled as well, and because of that, you do have a chance against Doflamingo. Black Yellow Luffy kind of is a rough matchup for you, and Teach as well, which is getting more and more presence, I think, as we end this format. So it's been probably the worst it's ever been since release, but it is still a very, very strong deck. In Tier 1, we've got Purple Luffy, Red Shanks, and Teach. These decks have mostly topped every event in this format for the English version, and they are in good spots. I do think Purple Luffy is carried a little bit by how many people who are just strictly on the deck. It still has some inconsistency issues, and it does have this thing where you have to tempo out, and if you miss one of your turns on tempo, you have a really bad time. Shanks is the 50-50 master. It just has so many kind of 50-50 matchups where you can have some players on a really good run and still do very well with it. It has won a large event as well in this format, and I think it's not bad, but it's also not as good. And like the high rolling is just so high, but like the mid rolling is so mid at the same time. And then we got Teach, which I've mentioned so many times, but last time it's been fine. It's been getting more popular. It's been a slow journey for it, but I do think it's been getting better, especially since OP10. We do have a lot of new cards for the deck, and because of that, people are getting used to it. They're trying it out, and they want to play Teach in 10, so I think they're picking up at the tail end of OP09 as well. 1.5, this is kind of, these decks have been kind of popping up. Most of these decks were either kind of higher up and they've moved down, or they're kind of lower and they've moved up. I think Monkey D. Luffy and Boa Hancock are more recent decks that people are kind of using in this meta, and realizing that they are powerful. I think Red Purple, they're kind of both outshined by their counterparts. I think a lot of people who are playing Red Purple Luffy are just people who don't like Purple Luffy. Same with Boa and Doflamingo. Their packages are pretty similar, but they are different leaders. Bonnie's been, I think, a little bit worse as the weeks have been going on. We've got Anel, which has been present just because it does have a really good matchup into Dofi, and then Smoker, which I think has just been popping up here and there. And then lastly, Tier 2. I think these decks have all topped events in this format so far, but I would say they were just kind of one-ofs. These are players that were playing very well, but they were on the bubble and they were able to sneak on into it. So I'd say like this one is like moderately unordered in this tier, but I do think it's moderately accurate for what it is. These are leaders that I've seen pop up again, but not very present. And then still banned. I don't think there's been a lot of discussion. I don't think that Sakazuki's getting unbanned. That would be a real big shock to me. Our Law. Most people are saying Law is going to stay banned. I don't see Sakazuki coming back at all. So we'll see if that's true or not, but this is my tier list for the OP09 meta. And this is going to be, again, my last video going over the meta itself. We are going to still do tournament breakdowns, and we are going to update the website with the weekly power rankings as well. But this is just going to be my last video because it's probably going to be pretty similar to this for the last couple weeks too. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys have been enjoying the OP09 meta. I'm looking forward to seeing how it ends, as well as getting into the OP10 meta. As you guys can probably see, I've been making some content for that as well. So that's going to be it, though. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.